Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Bedazzled from 2000. I say that because there actually is a original Bedazzled movie, and then they went on to remake it. And gotta say, I'm easily won over by wish fulfillment movies, which this movie really just is. And so, yeah, we kind of have a goofy concept here. And we kind of have like a goofy title to fit what's really going on here. And you would have thought of like why out of all the names that they would have went with, because this doesn't really explain what's going on. It doesn't really like help. Like this doesn't say it's a wish fulfillment movie with the title. So, but with this movie, we of course right away explain in a couple of words who Elliot really is, that he's just kind of this doormat or oblivious. And so we have Elliot who's not really liked by people. They just consistently have to forcibly put up with him. And when we go on and like I'm just right away just kind of feeling bad for this character, just because if anything he's more the butt of the joke, where people would rather to avoid him than like want to go on and be his friend. They just kind of put up with him until X amount of time, and then like, oh thank God, I'm gonna scramble out of here to go with my real friends or go on with, it's kind of like that kind of story. So for this film we have Elliot that is to decide that he desperately wants this girl Allison so badly that he's willing to give up anything for that opportunity. All of a sudden there's to be this whisper in the wind that is to have caught the attention of the devil, and so the devil is to go out of her way to find, of course, Elliot, meet up with him and tell him, hey, yeah, I'm the devil, and so I'm going to give you 7 wishes in hopes that you're going to get this woman and be able to go on and live happily ever after until all of these 7 wishes are to be done, and then I own you in the afterlife. So Elliot is to go on and make a number of different wishes to desperately try to figure out in some alternative world where Elliot is be this, that, this, and whatever, how he can go on and possibly be a better person for Allison. And it's kind of like a heartbreaking story that has like this interesting kind of ending, let's just say. So I would have, like, if I were to go on and kind of finish up this movie, how I would actually have wrote it, besides the way it's actually written, I would honestly have Elliot at the end of this just really realize that no matter what he does, he's never going to win Allison or any of these friends of his over in any world, in any way of whatever. I honestly wish that Elliot would have just wished at the end of this movie, considering how much time he has just spent with the devil. I would have liked there to have been some kind of weird drastic change where Elliot is to make the last wish and is to say for the devil to love him. Like, love him the way of which of like a boyfriend-girlfriend kind of situation, and then like reconfirming that, and then granting that wish, and then just go on and be like, well, like the devil can't just go on and just have this guy go to hell and like be in torment because she loves him. So there could have been a much more creative way to write this story, and I think it would have been like a bizarre ending to just kind of see how that really worked. But when really looking at it, it just feels like Elliot was to not fit in with the crowd of people that he was with, and like it would have been much more interesting if Elliot would have wished to be truly deeply in love with the devil, and that would have been an interesting kind of way to end things. Uh, because really, when looking at it, we start to see Elliot throughout this movie start to change who exactly he is, and he's to become a much more confident, etched like person because of all the things that have kind of happened to him, and possibly for the fact that Elliot might have the devil possibly as a friend. And plus, also, Elliot could just kind of wish anybody away if he just so deems to be that being a possibility. So, with that said, this is a great film. I chuckle and have enjoyment of it. Like, I can rewatch this tons and tons of times and still enjoy it. It's fun. Conveniently, at the end of the day, where can you say that you can go and see this film? Right now, currently, there's a lot of renting options like YouTube's or Vudu's or whichever. I'm going to give you a convenient option, or maybe I don't know, inconvenient, convenient, not quite sure, but we'll get to that when we get to it. So you can go on to a Google search and search the word Letter C Movies app and be able to dare in fact find an app that is to be called Letter C Movies and be able to download said app and be able to watch any movie that you want for absolutely free. There's another app that I recommend called Fox HD Movies, where the logo will say Fox HD Movies, but the title will say something different. It will say like Play 1080p HD. Go ahead and download that app from a Google search and be able to find a number of things. Every once in a while, if you go onto a Google Play Store and search the word TV Crush, uh, every once in a while there's going to be a movie that might be on that app. But when you search TV Crush, there's going to be an app that pops up that is to say HD movies and has a crown on the side of one of the letters. Go ahead and download that app. Sometimes there conveniently could possibly be this movie upon that app, and you can go ahead and say that you've seen that movie by any means. So, with that said, I think that this is a great movie. It's fun. Harold Ramis film. Of course, if you guys know Ghostbusters or Stripes or whatever, you know who Harold Ramis is. Of course, he's kind of like the director of this movie, as well as him going on and doing stuff like Multiplicity and stuff like that kind of later on in his career as kind of a director. But anyways, also Groundhog's Day, because he directed that film also. But anyways, let's go ahead and double five this bad boy up. Let's just go into Bedazzled. Let's go out of our way to say that it is spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the W to spoil this movie. So at the very beginning of this piece, we kind of have this really interesting approach of things, where they go on and they consistently show a number of things that people do in secret. I kind of find it hilarious that underneath one of the baby things, they call a baby a freeloader. It's like, oh, you freeloader. And so, but yeah, they have all these secrets that kind of pop up as these like bubble like things, like saying like, oh, well, this is a sinner, this is a saint. This one cheats on his taxes. This one goes on and is to be Republican, and this one's to be Democrat, and whatever. And like, it has all these kind of goofy things that, of course, is to say randomly about these people. Like this one's happy, this one's horny, something or other. So coming on to Elliot, where of course we see that he is to be this oblivious guy who's easy to please, and so Elliot is to make his way into this office, and when he goes on and opens his door for a woman, all of a sudden there seems to be a bajillion people that are all making it through this doorway, and so Elliot is just kind of waiting forever after going on and like just like, hey, like when am I ever gonna get in this freaking door? So like I kind of like how parts of this is shot, where we see kind of certain characters that are just kind of staying in one place, but all of a sudden we have like a whole entire day's worth of people all kind of zooming through this door. So it's kind of a fascinating like imagery of which we're seeing here. So Elliot goes into his office, and we have Elliot that's kind of being this cringe like guy, but he just can't help it because technically it's his personality. But uh, but Elliot is to go on and meet with Carol, and so Elliot gives Carol crap because it's like, hey, like we all start at 9, and this girl is like 15 minutes late. Carol goes on and gives Elliot the finger, and Elliot's just like, well, hey, I'm just kidding. Like he's just trying to like, yeah, like negative compliments to say to people, but then he just kind of turns around and he's like, oh, I'm just kidding. Ah, yeah, like you suck, but oh, just kidding, you know, like yeah, like let's camaraderie, everybody, come on. So so when Elliot's kind of coming around and making his rounds, everybody's just like trying to avoid him. So Elliot is to meet a guy named Dan who is played by Orlando Jones, and Elliot's just like, well, hey, like, so are you guys gonna be shooting some hoops tomorrow? Like, and hopefully it's gonna be around the time that you tell me that you're gonna go and shoot hoops because supposedly you guys said it was gonna be at 6:30, but by the time that I got there, you guys were all done. And Dan is like, well, yeah, I'm sorry, buddy. Like, maybe we'll schedule it another time. So Elliot goes on and is starting to meet with people. Elliot goes and meets with Bob, and Elliot is wanting Bob like, hey, how about you and me? Let's go out and let's go clubbing. Let's go and have a good time. And Bob is just like, well, I'm sorry, Elliot, but I'm married. I just don't have time for that kind of thing. I just want to go home and be with my wife. And Elliot's just like, oh, okay, all right. And all of a sudden, Jerry is to come on in. Bob is to like tell Jerry like, don't go in there. Whoops. So Elliot and Jerry, I guess, are big fans of like music equipment, and so we go into this story and Elliot's kind of showing this guy a number of pictures of just this random thing of equipment, and Jerry's like, "Oh, that's great." So Elliot goes on and is to do this kind of cubicle job. We really don't exactly narrow down exactly what he does, but it's just some cubicle job. Oh, I think it's some kind of like tech job, because he goes and is to find out information about some guy. Maybe it's internet. Maybe he works like for like internet connections. That's what I'm naturally assuming. But it seems like he's some IT guy or something along those lines. So there's that, I guess. So after Elliot is to go on and finish up with his day, he decides to go on to this bar where all of a sudden every single one of his coworkers are all at this bar together. And Elliot's like, oh, so you guys aren't all busy. Oh, wow, what a convenient thing that is. And so Elliot's like, well, maybe I should just go on and just grab a seat with you guys. And and so immediately they're just like, sure, you might just, just, sure. So Elliot all of a sudden is to see Allison come in. And so Elliot is just so taken by her. It seems like he knows little bits of information about her. Where it's like, oh, she ended up breaking up with her boyfriend like 4 months ago. And so the guys were like, well, hey, here's your time to swoop in there, buddy. Like, go on and see if things are going to work out. So these guys are kind of just betting that he won't do it, and so Elliot's like, well, Okay, this seems like the right time. Sure, why not? So Elliot goes on and meets with Allison, and Allison has no clue who Elliot is, even though Elliot is mentioned that they've worked together for 4 years. Elliot has no clue, or Allison has no clue who Elliot is. So Elliot goes on, he's like, well, yeah, like I heard that you're not with anybody, and so, like, hey, like maybe. Yeah, Allison kind of is not really interested in Elliot. Allison just kind of walks off. So Elliot, of course, mentions that he would give anything to be with that woman. All of a sudden, we have, of course, Elizabeth Hurley coming into action here. Um, it's kind of interesting whenever I can see Elizabeth Hurley besides like Austin Powers or it was kind of really interesting seeing her in The Runaways. I was like, ooh, like it's been a while since I've seen Elizabeth. Because I would go on and kind of see her in kind of like a rando kind of movies after you kind of search a while. But it was kind of interesting, kind of more recently seeing her in like Runaways, the Hulu show. But anyways, so Elizabeth Hurley, of course, is to play the devil, and I kind of get like there was a show called Reaper, and kind of with Elizabeth being the devil here. I go on and I get these like Reaper vibes where the devil is talking to Elliot, and she's like, "I'm the devil," and he's like, "Sure, whatever." So but all of a sudden, this white billiard ball comes flying into the fray of Elliot's atmosphere. And so Elliot goes on and picks this thing up and is to bring the white ball where, of course, the devil is. And so she goes on and is to immediately mention that Elliot was to say that he wanted Allison really badly. And Elliot's like, well, wait a minute. Like, how did you hear that from all the way over here? And the devil is just like, well, I have really good hearing. So Elliot's like, sure. Whatever, script. You read the script, didn't you? The devil's like, yeah, no. That's not what she said. But wouldn't that have been like a funny fourth wall breaking moment? The devil read the script. Like, we could have really, at the end of this, had a lot of fun. Or throughout this movie, we could have really just had, like, some fourth wall breaking fun where, like, we really just admit that this is a movie because why not? But, anyways, it would have been funnier that way. Plus, like, there's never, like, a look in the camera moment where it's like, aha. So, the devil goes on and is to say it's like, well, hey, like I can give you 7 wishes and get you Allison and have you live happily ever after, and I'm going to give you my card to convince you that I am the devil. And Elliot is just like, I don't know. I don't think so. So the devil is just like, well, hey, like, how about like I give you like a test wish? Like, how about we go on and you just wish for something? And so Elliot is like, well, I want a Big Mac and a big drink. So the devil drives all the way to Mickey D's McDonald's and goes on and has the both of them go and wait in line to order their food. And the devil is making Elliot order this food, and she's not even going to pay. She's going to have Elliot pay because the devil, I guess, doesn't have money because she left it in her other realm. And so Elliot is like, "Wow, that wish was just fantastic. Like I didn't even have you pay for my meal. I paid for it myself." And so the devil's like, "But it was granted, right?" And so Elliot is just like, wow, fantastic. So Now, the devil is to take Elliot to some nightclub in Oakland to really show him her power. So, the devil takes Elliot to this nightclub where everybody is to love Elliot. Like, they're treating him like they're his best friend. Everybody knows his name. This is like freaking Cheers. So, Elliot's like, oh my god, like, all this could happen. All these people could love me and like me and at least put up with me. And so the devil is like, you know what, I don't think you fully understand like my ability. I don't think you can fully get the grasp of things. And so all of a sudden Elliot is to kind of turn here and he sees this numbers of TV that are all showing this one image collected together. And so we have Allison who is to be just kind of running on this beach. And Elliot's like, "What's going on here? I'm not quite what's going on." So all of a sudden, we find out that Allison is running off to a slightly different version of Elliot, almost very Fabio-esque, long blonde hair, and tanned and whichever. And so we have it to where Elliot is just so tempted by like, oh my god, that's technically me. Ha! And so we of course have Fabio'd Elliot that's going on and telling Elliot to like, hey, sign it. Sign away. Sign away. So Elliot's like so seduced by this imagery of him just looking fantastic and him getting this girl, and he's just like, but I have to read the fine print. And the devil's like, you don't have to read all the fine print and all that stuff. Really, like, you just have to go on and just do these 7 wishes and just hand over your soul. And Elliot's like, wait a minute, what? I had to hand over my soul? And the devil's like, well, do you really know what your soul is? Like, do you see it? Uh, is it like something you have to get up in the morning and like fix and like, is it something you have to comb? No. Like, you don't even know what a soul is. So it's like, well, yeah, I guess I don't really know what a soul is. So Elliot, after all of this griping and groping and grouping and graven, Elliot goes on and signs away. So Elliot then is to, of course, go on and start these wishes. And so the very first wish, of course, that Elliot is to technically have is that he wants to, of course, be rich and he wants to be powerful. And so, really, with that, and he also, like, within that wish is to want Allison to be his wife. So, we have the devil that is to go on and tell Elliot, it's like, dunzo. So, Elliot is to wake up in this lavish mansion where he, of course, to have Allison in his bed. He's to go off to one of his, like, I don't want to say butlers, but maybe his assistant. So all of a sudden we have this guy who's speaking Spanish. So there's a whole dream sequence that's kind of done in Spanish. So I apologize right now if I didn't mention that before or ahead of a time. But there's a whole dream sequence that's technically done in Spanish for the most point. So we have Elliot here who's talking to this guy and he's like, wait a minute, like, I don't speak Spanish. Like, wait, like, I'm speaking Spanish right now. Oh my god. And so Elliot is saying that he was to take a Spanish class before and his teacher said that he couldn't put one lick of one sentence together. But man, is he proving that teacher wrong as he's going on and like saying that he wants to go to the library and a number of other things. So Elliot is to go on and get ready for his breakfast, his meal, and then to also talk to his men. So while he's going on and talking to his men, we find out that Allison is to possibly put her uh, rear, so to speak, in another man's stable. And that, of course, is to be her English lesson teacher character called Raoul. How dare you, Raoul? So, Elliot is just kind of like watching as Allison and Raoul are kind of walking together, and Allison is to grab on Raoul's cheeks, and Elliot is just like, something about that ain't right. So, but we have Elliot, of course, that's kind of focused on business and talking to his men. So, all of a sudden, later on in this sequence of things, we find out that it seems that Elliot's cocaine drug lord business is not going so well. And Elliot is like, wait a minute, like, I'm a drug dealer? I deal cocaine? No cocaine, no! And so there's even at one point where also Elliot is to talk to Allison, and Allison is really starting to slip away from Elliot because Allison is to only know like a very small bit of English. And when Elliot is to more confront Allison about Raoul, it seems that she goes on and she's like, you know what, I'm done with you, like, and she starts chucking things at Elliot, forcing him to get out of this place. So we have Elliot dealing with these Russians, and all of a sudden Raoul is to come to fray and is to want to gun down Elliot and kind of take over everything. So Elliot is now scrambling and trying to dodge all these bullets flying upon him. And so he decides to go and chuck this cocaine up into the air for these guys to shoot this cocaine. And so Elliot is trying to run off. And so the one thing that I kind of forgot about, but I'm going to reiterate now, is that the devil is to mention every time that Elliot is to realize that his dreams aren't going the way he wants them to, that he can kind of pull out of them at any point. Pull out. And so every single time he has to go and have this pager and dial 666 to get out of this ordeal. So Elliot goes on and he's now hanging on to this helicopter, and once his pager falls out of his hands, Elliot decides like, well, like I might as well just kind of fall to my death also because I can't no longer hold on to this helicopter. So Elliot tries to go and fly for the pager, grabs the pager, does 666, and gets out of this dream sequence where he goes on and falls on top of this car, where now the devil is to be this meter maid. So we immediately have it where they're haggling over this first wish. And so after this whole haggling situation, really there's nothing that that Ellie can really do here. He just kind of has to live with what he has to live with. And so he's like, God, like, what can I do? like we have Elliot that kind of realizes that his wishes aren't specific enough, and he consistently makes that mistake. I don't know how many times I would go on and see a number of wish fulfillment movies where I realize that a number of people, their wishes aren't specific enough to where they get uberly vague, to where at some points people die because of some wish, because they just say it's like, well, I want a ton of money, and then all of a sudden they get hit with a ton of money and they're like buried alive via like coins and whatever just smacking into them, or a big huge bag of money just crushes them to death. And but they wish that I want a lot of money, so much so that it accidentally murders me. So we, of course, have it where the devil is like, well, like, if it really doesn't seem that Allison is to want money and power, then, like, what do you think that we can do to try to win her over? So, both the devil and Elliot are to appear as, like, spirits to go into Allison's place to read her diary. And the devil is telling Elliot that Elliot can kind of do whatever he wants in Elliot's or in Allison's place, because Allison can't actually see him do anything. And coincidentally, Allison right now is currently in the shower. So Elliot kind of sneaks a peek of Allison in all of her glory, and so all of a sudden Allison is to have a diary, and so the devil is reading it. So the devil goes on and is to have this one entry where she says that Allison is to go back to her place and get tag teamed by 5 guys, and like she doesn't remember any of their names, but man, was it a fun night. And now it's like, wait a minute, what? Is that seriously her entry? And the devil is just like, no, like it was a joke. What if it really was? I'm like, it is now. No, come on. So instead, the real legitimate entry is Allison is to mention that she wants a more sensitive man. That it seems that she's just so sick of the tough and the guys of which that are broken, and she has to go on and nurse back to health and whatever and blah 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 blah, all this kind of weird goofy entry. So really the main focus thing is that Allison wants a sensitive guy. Yeah, like that's gonna freaking work. Uh, no, I'm sure it will. So all of a sudden, Allison is appearing as a ghost, or Elliot is appearing as a ghost to Allison, and so Allison is going through her room with this towel, and Elliot's kind of again seeing Allison, and he gets a little peek of something. So at one point, Allison goes through Elliot, and he's like, "Oh my God, that was just like Ghost." It was just like Ghost. If you guys have ever seen that Patrick Swayze movie with Demi Moore and Whoopi Goldberg and a number of other people that at one point were in that film, because they could be. Anyways, pushing on. So Elliot goes on and is to make his supposedly second wish. Let's be honest. At some point, we have the devil that brings into the fact that Elliot was to wish for a Big Mac and a Coke. And technically, the devil says that the Big Mac and Coke count as a wish. So, Elliot really only has 6 wishes, so technically the whole sensitive guy thing is actually Elliot's 3rd wish, without him even realizing it. So, let's go on. And Elliot at first mentions that he wishes that he could be the most sensitive man in the world, but then he realizes that that's a mistake because he needs to be more specific. And the devil's like, good, I could have really had a lot of jokingly things and kind of done a lot of goofy things with that. And so Elliot is like, wait a minute, I want to be an emotionally sensitive man. But here's the thing, whenever we get to have these wishes, we go to like the far extreme of everything. So when it comes down to every single one of these things, we have the devil kind of go overboard every single time, so that way this guy is to be just so absurdly which end whatever, to where really at the end just doesn't work out consistently, and we're finding that out. So in the third wish, we have Elliot, who goes on and he is to cry every time there is a sunset, and makes his way to Allison, who is at this beach. And so he's like, you know what? I want to go on and sing you a song about your hair, or I want to sing you a sonnet. So Elliot goes on and he's like, he's talking about the dolphins and like dolphin safe tuna and all this goofy garbagely stuff, sadly enough. And then he goes on and quickly sketches Allison like this portrait, and he does like a perfect job, even though he mentions like, well, I'm not much of a drawer, but like let's like Leonardo DiCaprio just freaking draw you out like one of his French girls. So so Elliot is trying to like be like the perfect like poetic man to win over Allison, and so all of a sudden we go on and we have a number of guys that are all like, "Hey man, I'm purple sneaky punch," like I'm more of athletic and I'm more of this, and like I have an army shirt on, and yeah. So we have these guys come in, and of course, they're the same guys who, of course, were the office guys. Uh, and so we have these kind of athletic guys that are just going on and coming to Allison, and it's like, hey, you want a beer? And she's like, well, of course I do. And all of a sudden, Elliot's like, wait a minute. Like, I thought we were enjoying a moment together. And Allison is just like, well, you know what? Like, you're just too sensitive. Like, you're just too much. Like, I just want to go on and just be taken by a man and be used. And this guy is like, well, yeah, that's gonna be me. And so Allison runs off with this man, and so now Elliot's in tears, and he's going on and having this pager, and he's 666ing, and then he looks at the sunset. And he's like, no, I can't look at you. Cause it's a fun moment where he keeps looking at the sunset. He's like, when is it ever gonna set? So that backfires. So at this point in time, we just finally have it where, like, Elliot just is like, this is not gonna work. None of these wishes are gonna work. Every single time, like, there's going to be, like, there's no way to come up with the perfect man for Allison to really want, so this is never really going to work. Every single time we have this one wish and it goes far too like one side of things, we realize that that's just eventually to be like Allison's kryptonite. So it's just never going to work. So we then have Elliot, who's just like, you know what? Like, those guys that were at the beach that were kicking sand in my face, or I was like, puh, puh. It's like, you know what? Maybe I want to be strong. Like, maybe I want to be athletic. Maybe I want to go on and just, like, have fans and, like, have everyone love me and have things just kind of work out. And Elliot's like, is there a wish coming? And Elliot's like, I want to play professional basketball. And immediately we have the devil go on and like, well, obviously you're going to be Dennis Rodman. And Elliot's like, no! And the devil is just like, no, you want to be Michael Jordan. He's like, yeah. So we go on and we have to show, uh, of course, Elliot's character here, who has to kind of be like CGI'd in, sadly, um, because Brendan is not to be like 7'6" or something like that, and so we have to have him like CGI'd in through most of these things, or we kind of have to like show like a perspective of him just kind of going on, and so plus also they probably had to go and hire people that were actually like these heights to go on and be Elliot here. So we have Elliot going on and being this athlete, and like this guy is throwing like 3-point bombs, and like he's kind of doing this like over the shoulder basket, just like whoa, like Elliot's going on breaking uh, this this hoop, and having like glass being blown out of his mouth, and they're like, yeah, he'll spit glass at your act, yeah. So we have the guys who are sportscasters, and they're kind of doing all this kind of funny, goofy stuff. So, like, we have Elliot that's just kind of blowing these guys out of the water, like rebounding like no other, tipping off the ball, easily getting the ball. Everything is just working out. So, after this game, we just have Elliot like sweating like a madman, just like consistently, like we're just pouring on the sprinkler of water that is to be coming down his face. Because when really looking at it, you kind of see in a number of those like NBA games, you're just seeing like these guys are just covered and just like they're sweating like the day is long, as if they like went through like a horrible sauna experience every time they play basketball. And I can completely understand that, because I would go on and like be sweating like a mother or two whenever I'd go on and just kind of do any kind of sport, especially if it's an outside one. I'm like sweating forever. Um, so we of course have Elliot, who's doing this interview. He's like, "Well, yeah, we play pretty good." And he's like spitting all this sweat. He's like, "Yeah, like we're really good, and just we play really good, and like the team's good, like and like go Diablos, we're number one." He goes back to the back after he's like spat all over this interviewer as he's talking, and so he has this towel, and I'm immediately thinking, why doesn't Elliot know the size of which that he is to be holding upon his schwang before, of course, this moment is to have actually happened? So Allison weirdly is this sports interviewer that, of course, to consistently go on and be talking to Elliot in this locker room, which doesn't really make sense to me, but it is what it is. So Allison is doing this interview with Elliot, and she's mentioning it's like, well, you must have a big, huge ego that you have to put in check, and Elliot's like, well, hey, we're a team, and and we work together. Yeah, so, like it takes a team to win a game, like all this kind of very like generic sports stuff. So consistently, Elliot is like saying it's like, well, hey, I can have you come with me, and I can show you my bottle cap collection at home. And Allison's like, yeah, I'd be really intrigued about that. And so Elliot is just like, well, I guess I should change. And she's like, well, yeah. And so Elliot goes on and kind of whips down his towel, or whips open his towel, to all of a sudden notice that his twig and berries are very twigging and berried like, to our very miniaturely twigged and berried. Happens to the best of us. Anyway, so Elliot goes on and he's like, oh my god, dang that devil, dang that devil to hell. And so Elliot goes on, and he realizes that his schwang is not exactly hanging in there, if you know what I mean. So Allison is just like, you know what, I got a big huge piece with the NFL, and I just so she runs off. So Elliot, because of his size of his manhood, Elliot is to go on and just be like, you know what, like I'm just gonna go and try to figure out how I can go on and page the devil. But Elliot continues to make some mistakes because, of course, like this guy isn't IQ wise all of that thing called intelligent, I guess. So we have him paging 555, then 999, then 666. So Elliot goes back, and we have it again where every single runaround, like we now, like there's also the one scene where Elliot is to go on and realize that the devil is to be a teacher in some class somewhere, and so the devil is mentioning for all the kids to just like have like forget all the studies, forget about French, like everybody speaks English anyways, right? And so she has them go on and like say, hey, no homework for this whole entire class, like don't forget your video games, like sleep in late, like come to school 10:30, right? Because you guys just need some time off. So and that, of course, to be the last wish. So in this basketball thing, after the basketball thing, we find out that weirdly Elliot is wearing scrubs, and the devil is to be this doctor that is giving a bunch of patients like candy, like M and M's and all this goofy stuff. So Elliot then goes on and he realizes, like, God, like, this is never going to work. He's just, like, almost given up at this point. But, like, we even have the devil who's like, well, I'm trying my best. Like, my life is a living hell and you don't understand. And, like, all this stuff. And then Elliot goes on and he's just like, wait a minute, wait, maybe I'm sorry. And so she's like, oh, so you bought that? And the Elliot's like, what? The devil's like, no, that was true. That was all true. Sure it was. so so Elliot is, of course, like he's trying to be nice to the devil of all people, but like at some point, like he's like just standing up for himself because he's just like really, like you couldn't have gone on and like it was so close for that all to have worked. So Elliot goes on and he is to finally just say, it's like, well, you know what, like instead of being an athlete and all this jazz, like how about this time around I just go on and I'm just really articulate. I'm really intelligent. I know everything about everything. And like I'm very well endowed, but not circus freak wise. And the devil's like, I could have had some fun with that. I'm like, yeah, you could have, but too bad. So now Elliot is to be this very articulate guy, and immediately when we kind of see this scene, the first thing that I kind of think of is the show Castle with Nathan Fillion, where it feels like this is like Castle's Nathan Fillion before Castle's Nathan Fillion, and I think that's kind of funny. How probably Nathan Fillion probably saw this movie. He's like, oh, I'm going to be like that guy. Because probably maybe somebody might have seen this movie, but it feels like if you put like side by side Elliot in this movie and you put Castle side by side, they look the same. They look the exact same. It's weird. So Elliot goes on and he is to come into this party and everybody is just so excited because Elliot is to have written his fourth book. And Elliot is just like, well, yeah, like it was such a breeze to just go on and write this one. So all of a sudden, like we have like everybody just so happy that Elliot is to be at this party, and we of course have Elliot saying like, "Hey, Doctor Giggity Giggity Bob" or some goofy name, like just random names that they could have just made up at any moment because it doesn't really matter. So Elliot goes on, and how he meets Allison in this thing is Allison is to be kind of overwhelmed by the fact that Elliot is to be as smart as he is, and like she's a big fan of his books. And so Allison is to try to find a way to talk with Elliot. And so she's like, "Oh my god, I loved your last book." And Elliot is just like, well, yeah, like of course, like considering the last book, like I didn't like it as much. Like this book, I was going to improve upon the thing I didn't like about the last book. So all of a sudden, more and more, Elliot is just going on and on and on about like these intelligent words that he can go and spew out, going and having Allison quiver in her boots. So Allison is talking about like, or Elliot is talking about like uh, the like this woman's skin being the largest organism upon her body, and like he's going on and like having these like big fancy words of which that I'm not going to try to even figure out how to go on and re-say here. Uh, it's the epididymis. What? It's the riboflavia. What? It's the hooda hooda hooda. Ha 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 na ho ha. Anyways, so Allison is to be quivering in her high heels by all the words of which that Elliot is to say here. So they're running their way back to, of course, Elliot's place, so they can go on to do the horizontal mumbo. The only problem of which that we kind of technically have here is we actually find out that Elliot is to have, sadly, another person within his bed, who, of course, is to be Lance, who is a person. And so, all of a sudden, Lance is telling Elliot, it's like, well, I've been waiting up all night for you. And Elliot's like, wait a minute, like, I'm not gay? No, no. And so Elliot's like, oh, like, well, Allison, how about we prove this? How about we go on and we kiss one another, and like it'll showcase that I'm just not. So both of them kiss, and Elliot just realized, yeah, I'm gay. So Allison runs off, and Lance is like, "Where have you been?" And so we just start having them bickering back and forth, and so at this point, Elliot is just furious at this point. Just like, I would just be like, this, it's not gonna work. So now Elliot is trying to think about the biggest thing that he could go on and do at this point. Because if nothing else is going to work, then Elliot's going to go on and become this big, massive guy that the whole world is going to have, or a whole country, let's just say, is going to love him. And so, why not Allison? So, Elliot goes on and wishes that he, of course, would be the president of the United States. And so the devil is like, done. So all of a sudden, we have Elliot who becomes a president of the United States, not the president of the United States. And so we find out Elliot has gone back in time to be Abraham Lincoln. And so all of a sudden we find out that Elliot is to go to this play, and Elliot's like, oh no, we're not going to this play. Like, I know how this play ends. And they're like, oh no, this is a brand new play. And he's like, oh great, all right. So Elliot is trying to thumb through wherever his pager is, because he's like, oh, I'm going to get out of here. And so now, at this point, like, when is it going to be where Elliot is to realize he's basically effed here? Never, I guess. So, Elliot goes back and is talking with the devil, and Elliot just goes back to work, and we have, like, his boss giving him crap, and he just kind of, like, winks at him, and he's like, like, okay, all right. And he's like, he's going back to work, and so the devil's like, well, hey, like, you got two more, you got wishes left, buddy, like, come on. And so Elliot's like, no, I gotta get back to work, because, like, nothing's gonna work out with you. So the devil's like, yeah, you got wishes left. And Elliot's like, yeah, I got 2 wishes coming. And the devil's like, no, you only have 1 wish. And Elliot's like, well, wait a minute, like, count them out. And so we, of course, have the Colombian drug lord. We have the overly sensitive guy. We have the star athlete. We have, of course, the articulate guy. And then we have the president, which is 5. And so the whole griping is about the Big Mac and a Coke. How that technically is the 6th wish, which was the original wish. So Elliot and the devil are kind of debating about it, to the point where now Elliot is going to church to try and talk to some priest to have Elliot ask this priest, hey, can you, like, bring God down here? Like me and the devil are having an argument, and I, like, want to go on and kind of clear this up. And the priest is just like, oh, so what now? You want me to go and get God? Like, yeah, the God, a God, yeah, like, come on and get him down. I need to talk to him. So this guy goes, and because they just kind of write down that he's, like, drunk and disorderly, even though he evidently isn't, like, drunk. They just write it down weirdly. So they might as well, like, they could just say that he's, like, disturbing the peace, or maybe he was, like, being a disturbed man. I don't know. They could have figured out something. So they give him a night to kind of cool things off. All of a sudden, Elliot is talking to this cellmate after he's going on and talking to the devil. And the devil is telling him, like, hey, like, Elliot, like, you and me could be really good friends. Like, so Elliot's like, sure, we can. So Elliot goes into the cell where all of a sudden he's possibly talking to some angel, or maybe even God. So all of a sudden this cellmate is talking to Elliot, and he's like, hey, that cop, she's awful. And Elliot's like, yeah. It's like, what are you in for? And Elliot's like, eternity. And the guy's like, wow, like, that's rough. So we have the cellmate that tells Elliot that it's like, well, hey, like, technically the devil doesn't really own your soul. Technically God does. Like, the devil can kind of give you the runaround, but, like, God really has, like, your soul, and you can kind of do with it what you want. So Elliot goes on, and he's like, you know what, like, I'm just not going to do the last wish. Like, I'm just gonna stubbornly just not do it, because he goes on and meets with the devil at this club, and he's like, you know what, I like, there's nothing you can give me that I want. And so the devil is like, well, like, you're gonna do this last wish, and you're gonna do it whether you want to or not. So she's going on and like towering over Elliot with this pitchfork and rah, I'm gonna get you. And so Elliot goes on, and his last wish is that Allison is to be happy. And the devil is like, oh. All of a sudden, Elliot is to realize that he is not sent to hell after all. And Elliot's like, what happened? What's going on? And so the devil is to tell Elliot that the wish contract was voided because Elliot was to figure out some loophole, that he did a goodwill deed, and that, of course, was to turn around and negate that contract. It's kind of like in the end of the Constantine movie, where Constantine goes and stabs into himself, and the devil goes and tries to collect John Constantine, but then John kind of tells the devil about what's going on in the other room. And so when the devil comes back, we have the devil who asks John, it's like, well, what do you want? Do you want an extension? And so Constantine's like, no. Like, for anything, you have the one girl's sister, like, just let her go to heaven. And I'll gladly go to hell if she goes to heaven. And the guy's like, seriously? That's what you want? And Constantine says yes. All of a sudden, we end up seeing that Constantine is going up to heaven because he did a good deed, and so the devil is to just kind of pull him back, Constantine, back to Earth, and now forcing Constantine to live the rest of his life without his lung cancer. And so now, like, Constantine's like starting all over again. So now the devil is telling Elliot, it's like, hey, like, don't tell anybody if you do a good deed that, like, this whole contract will be negated. And Elliot's like, oh, I won't. And so all of a sudden, like, between the two moments that they have together, we have Elliot that's kind of telling the devil, it's like, you know what, you're probably my only and best friend. And the devil's like, aw. So they walk off, and so Elliot's to realize nothing is ever really going to happen with Allison. He's kind of like given up on that. And when Elliot is to talk with Allison and just go on to like, hey, like, do you want to go and just have a drink together? And Allison's like, well, I'm sorry, I'm with somebody. And Elliot's like, oh, well, like, if something doesn't work out, then it's like those awkward, uncomfortable things. So all of a sudden, Elliot is to make his way back home to find out that there is another girl who I believe is Nicole, who is to kind of come into fray here. And Elliot's like, wait a minute, what? Like, all of a sudden, a girl that looks just like Allison is like interested in me and likes me. Like, this is great. And so Elliot asks Nicole, like, hey, do you have a sister? And she's like, no. So all of a sudden we go on here and we have both Elliot and Nicole kind of like walking through this road together, and like everything just kind of perfectly happily ends. And that's how the movie just kind of plays out. So speaking of which, I think I'm going to play myself out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.